Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for braving the heat wave to be here. Really happy to see you all. Welcome to Better Brains, Better Business. This is the TTN Workplace series. I'm Alex, by the way. Nice to see you all. I'm going to start by just quickly introducing TTN, give a little bit of information about us, and then let you know what we'll be going through in today's session. TTN, we are a charity specializing in the link between nutrition and brain health. We've been going for 40 years now, and I'm just going to talk you through here, especially a little bit more about what our expertise is. Our mission is simple. It's about helping people to think better, feel better, perform better through evidence-based nutrition and behavioral change. Our work spans a number of different sectors. We work with corporates, we work in health services, schools, communities, and prisons, and we deliver research-driven programs designed to improve well-being, performance, and outcomes. We're also the creators of Alana. That's our digital platform, which is something else we will cover at the end of today's session. What we're mainly going to focus on today, though, is the principles that underpin our work. We explore a challenge that faces every organization faces, helping people perform consistently and at their best. Mel will explore the science behind this, energy, focus, mood, and the role nutrition plays in this. And then Brian will look at behavioral change, how this happens in practice, and explore habits we can realistically integrate and maintain into busy working environments. We'll finish with a Q&A session. And our aim today is for you to leave the session with some practical ideas to help you think more clearly, sustain energy, and perform at your best. I'll hand you over now to Brian.
All right, thank you, Alex. So let's set the scene on what's currently facing the workplace. So one of the biggest challenges in the workplace is with regards to burnout and absenteeism, which unfortunately leads to hidden costs to businesses. And the prevalence of burnout is actually up to 25% for every company, because every year there are reports that are stating that 1 out of 4 UK employees suffer from burnout, and that stress, anxiety, and poor diet is actually driving 17 million lost workdays, which means lower productivity and higher staff turnover, which results in the cost that we're talking about, which can go up to 28 billion per year. And one of the major factors in driving all of these factors that leads to burnout, it's actually a poor diet. So why should brain health belong on every organization's work agenda? Because it's commonly very overlooked. Your brain is your greatest asset. It helps in creativity, it helps in strategy, it helps you with problem solving, and helps you to make fast and clear decisions. However, the workplace and the environment means that, we have long hours at work, we are high pressure and constant deadlines, and traveling results in meals on the go. And we need some quick fixes to get a short live, but which results in a hard crash during the day. And some of these things could relate to caffeine or sugar or anything that would get us keep on going throughout the day. And all of these are actually risking, making it easier for you to get burnout. But what's the opportunity here? The opportunity is that nutrition is actually a lever that you can control, because it helps to sustain steady energy throughout the day. It helps you support focus and mental clarity. And more importantly, it helps to build resilience and lowers the burnout risk. So, as Alex said, we are looking at 3 things today. The first one is going to be covered by Mel, the benefits of nutrition on your brain and cognition. And then I'll come in with behavioral science and how we can use it to decode dietary behaviors. And Alex would then look at the psychology behind successful behavior change and how we can make it work for you. So I'll hand it over to Mel to talk about the wonderful science on nutrition and the brain.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Alex. So firstly, I want to start with the concept that the brain is not fixed. It is being shaped all the time. So with that, I'm going to make a fairly bold claim that things like cognitive decline doesn't have to be inevitable. So I think for a long period of time, we've been led to believe that cognitive decline is just a natural part of aging. Our memory, our focus, our thinking peaks when we're young, and then after that, it's downhill. We hit retirement age, and then we're somewhat kind of put out to pasture. And actually, that very thought, that an acceptance of that is an issue in itself. So if you expect to decline, you can start living as though it's already happening. You do less, you challenge yourself less, you're dropping the very things that potentially protect our brain. And then that expectation becomes a little bit self-fulfilling. So it is important that firstly, we do not accept this and we continue to look to develop the brain. For most of us, like I said, memory loss is not a linear part of aging. The amazing thing about the brain, and it's probably why we do what we do, is that it's plastic. It keeps adapting, it keeps rewiring in response to how we live, in response to our nutrition, in response to exercise. It is always adapting. Now, I don't want to completely overstate that. None of it is a guarantee, and aging is a real challenge. But if the brain is continuously shaped by the environment, then the ordinary input, so like I said, how we move, how we sleep, how we handle stress, and above all, how we eat, becomes really, really significant in supporting healthy brain aging. So here is just, I think, a few alarming stats, really, or positive stats. So two of the things that we fear most when it comes to the brain is kind of slowing of thinking, slowing of focus, cognitive decline. And if we look at advanced cognitive decline, then we're looking at things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And we tend to file all of that under fate or genetics. And I would say this is actually something that has shifted loads in recent years. So, something called the Lancet Commission, so one of the world's oldest, most prestigious medical journals, now estimates that up to 45% of dementia risk is linked to modifiable risk factors. And actually, there has been a more recent study which has used UK Biobank data that suspects that figure is closer to kind of 70%. And how do they do these studies? So these studies are basically looking at risk factors. So lots of risk factors can overlap and they accumulate. So the researchers here are essentially asking if we could wave a wand and remove these risks from the whole population, how much dementia might we prevent? And some of that is things like education in early life, other things like smoking, head injuries, untreated hearing loss. And then others come down to things like nutritional inputs, so whether you're carrying too much weight and other things. Now, the other stat on this slide is around mental health, depression. So you may have heard of things like exercise supporting mood, but we now have very good evidence that nutrition, people eating a high quality diet, is associated, and this is a pooled data from around 30% lower risk of depression. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. So this is a lovely, lovely trial. So this is the SMILES trial, which is published by someone called Felice Jacka over in Australia. And it was the first randomized controlled trial to test whether improving diet could treat moderate to severe depression. So adults with depression were assigned either to a dietary support group where they followed a modified Mediterranean pattern with a dietitian, or they were assigned to just a social support group. They found that those on the Mediterranean diet, after 12 weeks, about a third of them reached full remission. So full remission from moderate to severe depression against around 8% of the cold control group. And whilst, you may not have depression, the same biology that lifts mood also underpins focus, energy, judgment. So far we've gone from decline isn't inevitable to randomized controlled trials showing that food can shift even clinical levels of depression. But that I want to kind of explain how. So how does food actually reach the brain and change how it works? So again, to maybe oversimplify, but something that I want you to grasp is the brain is physically built from the food that we eat. So the physical dry weight of the brain is around 60% fat. So things like omega-3s form the cell membranes. The brain has around 86 billion neurons, which are continuously firing, and each of them needs a steady nutrient supply. And now, whilst the brain is only 2% of our body weight, it burns about 20% of energy. Where does energy come from? It comes from our food. And then roughly three-quarters of the brain is water. So if we look at things like dehydration or hydration, we've got to think about the impact that that has on the brain. So essentially, food really is the supply chain for our brain to function, along with many other things within the body. So I think this slide is really important, particularly for the modern environment that we live in. We are constantly in demand, constantly available, have a million decisions to make. And what does that do to the brain? So, firstly, I want to start with that the brain cannot distinguish between different types of stresses. So, whether this is stress from missing a bus, whether that's stress from your job, whether that's stress from relationships, a poor diet, over-exercising, under-exercising, is interpreted in the body in the same way. And what happens when you experience this is the body activates in the area in the back of our brain called the amygdala. And this is essentially our threat detector, but it also fires to things like novelty and change. Now, when that kind of detector is alerted, it signals to another area in the brain, which is the hypothalamus, that stress is around. The hypothalamus then sends signals to other areas in the body, such as the adrenal glands, to produce cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Now, our body is always going to prioritize making our stress hormone. So, other hormones and neurotransmitters, which are made up of the same core ingredients, get deprioritized. So, stress quietly pushes your nutritional needs up at the exact moment that you're probably likely not to be eating as well. So, when we do look at the brain, though, it is important to focus not on just a single nutrient. And I'm going to give a little bit of an example here. So, serotonin, which is typically affiliated with kind of like our happy hormone. So, serotonin is built from something called tryptophan, which comes from protein. So, if you're thinking chicken, turkey, eggs, dairy. But the conversion of this needs cofactors. So, it needs something like iron to reach the next step, and then vitamin B6 to then make the next step again. You can see the kind of diagram on the slide. And miss any of those little micronutrients, the whole kind of chain stalls. So, really, nutrients work as a team. So going back to the cortisol example and the body prioritizing it first, it borrows from the production of serotonin, it borrows from the production of dopamine, and it borrows from the production of things like acetylcholine, which is involved in our memory. So with good nutrient reserves, you can cover the emergency and keep that baseline kind of running, but without them, the baseline gives way. Having said all of that, and having said that nutrients work as a team, I do want to spotlight a few. So, like I said, omega-3. So this is the very structure of our brain. So things like EPA and DHA. This comes from things like oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, herring. It builds some cell membranes, it's anti-inflammatory, and there's a lot of studies which show that higher intake tracks with lower risk of depression, better cognition, slower cognitive decline. Then we have things called polyphenols. So these are the bright compounds that are typically present in things like berries, dark chocolate, tea, coffee, and they improve the blood flow to the brain. They raise something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and they're associated with actually quite acute benefits in things like sharper focus and cognition. Then we have leafy greens. So this is an array of kind of different foods. So rocket, watercress, spring greens, spinach, kale. These are linked to, again, improved cognition, and even kind of tiny daily servings can go a huge way. And then B vitamins. So these are again in lots of different foods. So whole grains, eggs, pulses, grains, and they're central to our mood, our focus. They do better with combining with different foods as well. But these are the main ones that I kind of want to sing about. Then also, so I've just talked about the foods that directly impact your brain. And then there's another thing that's probably got a little bit more attention in recent years. So this is the concept called the gut-brain axis. And so this is simply your gut and your brain in a constant two-way communication. So your gut influences your brain and your brain influences your gut. And to be honest, we've probably known about this for a long time. Things like having gut feelings, getting butterflies, maybe having a stomach upset when we're stressed. That is directly the gut-brain axis in action. Now, the communication between the gut and the brain happens across three main channels. So, the vagus nerve, which is kind of a physical attachment. So, we have a nerve running from our gut to our brain, brain to our gut. Then, hormonally, so around 90% of serotonin is actually physically made in the gut. And then for your immune channels, so around 70% of the immune system lives within our gut, and those signals can reach the brain. So, when we're looking at supporting the gut to influence the brain function, we typically look at something called the gut microbiome, which is simply the collection of bacteria which reside in the gut. Now, these bacteria are so powerful, and this is probably a completely different presentation itself. So I'm just going to hone in on the key concepts of this. The main thing that bacteria in the gut thrive off is fiber. Now, fiber is present in things like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, pulses, legumes. But as it stands, only 4% of people in the UK hit the recommended 30 grams of fiber a day. So we are potentially missing an opportunity to support our brain health along with loads of other different things within the body. Now, the gut, which I've just talked about, is probably the slower route, but blood sugar is the fast one. So your brain, as I said, runs almost entirely on glucose, and it's really sensitive to swings in glucose. So what you're after with supporting blood glucose levels isn't kind of a sugar high, it's steadiness. So if you picture almost like a line that gently rises and falls, rather than one that's kind of big peaks and big troughs. When your supply is steady, your focus and your mood and your energy is steadier. So when it spikes and crashes, so if we're thinking of that kind of mid-afternoon, 3 p.m. slump, those are the things that we probably can control to get your blood glucose a little bit steadier and to support things like your afternoon meetings and preventing that energy dip. So there's a few ways in which we can support it. So the first I'd probably go to is the quality of your carbohydrates. So the high sugar foods like pastries, sweets, drinks, white breads, white rices, those are the things that are going to kind of really spike your blood glucose levels shortly after you're going to get a crash. So what we'd look to do is just shift those groups to choosing more kind of whole grain examples. So switching from white bread to brown bread or kind of white rice to brown rice or to whole grain varieties. So food that supports your energy levels are the complex carbs. So they're the oats, the lentils, the whole grains, the quinoa, sweet potato. They release their energy slowly. The second thing is how you pair these foods. So carbohydrates on its own can hit glucose level, lead to increases in glucose levels quite quickly. But if you add things like fat or fiber, this actually slows the release of glucose into the blood. So it's the difference between having something like a piece of toast with butter versus a piece of toast with eggs, which is protein and a fat, and avocado. So that the combinations of food help to slow the release of blood glucose. The third is timing. So just be aware that we've evolved into a society where it's very easy to kind of pick and graze throughout the day. But as you're doing that, you're gently topping up those glucose levels. So we want to look to support and try and get gaps between the meals and have snacks when it's appropriate, but make sure they're also ones that are going to support your energy. And then the fourth, which we're probably not focusing on as much today, is movement. So a bit of activity after eating, even a short walk, going up and down the stairs in the office, helps basically activate your muscles and receptors on your muscles to soak up the glucose, to steady that kind of glucose spike. None of this is about being perfect. I'm just trying to give kind of different ways that you can potentially support your blood glucose levels to then support your energy throughout the day. So kind of what I've covered so far is trying to add in kind of good things to support your brain health. But there are a couple of things that just to be aware of that we maybe want to cut back on. So ultra processed food. So processing typically, and this is, don't take me as gospel because there's some things that don't apply to this rule, but they typically strip out nutrients that we've been talking about. And UPFs are about 57% of the calories the average UK adult eats. So we know, there's potentially a bit of a micronutrient gap there, which all impacts our brain function. And actually, in a lot of studies, and one study that I can remember in particular, around a week of a Western style diet, so high in ultra processed foods, produced measurably impaired memory tied to kind of structural changes within the hippocampus. The reassuring part is when you go back to eating a good diet, this effect is reversed. The second thing is dehydration. So as you dehydrate, the body releases something called vasopressin, which can also raise our cortisol levels, again, adding to stress. So mild dehydration can make you irritable, impair our decision making for kind of no obvious reason. And what I would say with this is a kind of a useful afternoon rule is when you feel off or feel like your energy is low, drink water and reassess in kind of 15 minutes up before assuming it's anything kind of bigger. So consistency beats intensity. So what I'm just going to go through a few things that you can try and embed now to take home. So this is basically how I would adopt building a plate. So rather than focusing historically on things like calories, I try and focus on how you balance a plate. And if you're looking at things like trying to include 40 to 50% of the plate as vegetables or fruit, you're hitting your fiber, you're hitting your polyphenols. Then look about 25% of it as protein. So think eggs, fish, beans, tofu, tempeh. 25% of carbohydrates, so whole grains, legumes, sweet potatoes. And then we're looking at kind of like a thumb size pinch of fat, so olive oil, nuts, seeds, oily fish. So I would say with this, take it as a bit of a template. Demands can change depending on stage of life. Your protein requirements may go up, and then this balance may shift somewhat. But hopefully it's quite a useful concept to take away. The next is rhythm. So there's a field emerging called chrononutrition, which is basically the timing of when you eat your food. And there's just a few things that I want you to focus on. So focus on having regular meal timings, eat, for example, breakfast at a similar time each day. The brain loves predictability. Trying to stop 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. So late meals can clash with the body's wind down and the overnight repair that's really important for our body. It can also raise core body temperature, which can then delay sleep. And then lastly, fuel before you load. So don't go into, a long meeting or something that requires a lot of kind of big decision making running on empty. Then lastly from me, and Brian is going to go into this in more detail, but behavior change is so important. I think it's fair for me to say that knowledge rarely changes behavior. If we did, we'd all be eating really well. So most of our food choices nowadays are quite automatic, and unfortunately our environment is acting against us. So it's important that we try and work with this. So what I would do is I'd start by changing one thing. So small enough to feel so trivial. So pick the easiest one. So that may be adding one extra kind of portion of fruit. It may be adding one extra portion of vegetable. It may be simply just kind of adding a glass of water in a day. Then habit stack. So attach the new thing to something you already do. So again, going back to the kind of water point, maybe put a glass of water beside the coffee machine that you're going to have so that you kind of have the coffee, have the water at the same time. Then anchor to your identity. So something like I'm trying to eat better is a bit of a goal that often kind of fails rather than looking at I am someone that eats a lot of vegetables, who you are, and that kind of outlasts willpower. And lastly, kind of plan for the bad day. Decide in advance kind of the minimum that keeps you on track when, things get busy, the bus is late, there's a decision your boss makes, all of these things. So try and plan for that day. But I know Brian is now going to go into that in a lot more detail, so I'm going to hand back to him.
Right. Thank you so much, Mel. Before I start, I'm seeing some questions coming in. So please feel free to type in the questions using the Q&A function that you would see on your screen. So yeah, just send in the questions and then we will answer the questions in the Q&A session bit at the end of the presentation. So thank you. So carrying on, we'll be talking about how we can understand dietary behaviors using behavior science. And Mel mentioned this point, which is quite important, which is why knowing and having all this knowledge isn't the same as doing, right? Because there's so many factors that gets in the way of healthy eating. So being working adult, we will have time pressure. We'll have very little time to think about food. In fact, I think most of us would have a bit of trouble trying to remember what we ate last night or even 2 days ago, right? Because there's so many things in our busy lives that we place importance on, but food and what we eat is probably the last thing that we would think of. Now, convenient, when you have a very stressed and packed day, you would go with whatever that's the easiest. So if it's a meal deal from the Tesco's or any of the convenience stores that we see, or if it's just any of the value meals that you see in terms of quick and easy going, that's what you do. Or the organization culture, where your organization might have snacks in between meetings, and the snacks are things that pastries, etc., things that would give you a feel good factor, but may not be the most nutritionally best for you. And of course, coffee runs. When you drink too much caffeine, what happens when your body crash? Or we just need coffee to sustain our day. But of course, the final one that everybody, gets concerned about is actually the cost and availability of the healthy foods. And one of the misconceptions that I always have when I'm talking to clients or when we are talking to the people whom we run our initiatives with is that they feel that healthy foods are often very hard to get, be it in terms of cost or how easy it is to find. And therefore, all this, when it comes together, it puts in a lot of barriers in between you and your food choices. So the next question that I would like you to think about is where and when does your food choices get made every day? Okay. And one of the things that people don't realize is that your food choices are made the moment you open up your eyes and then you start thinking about what you're going to eat, what you're going to do, and all the different information that you take in throughout the active waking time feeds into your decision making. You could have seen an advertisement for a specific, soft drink brand and say, I would like to drink that. Or you might see a chocolate advertisement or hear someone talk about how amazing, the chocolate that they ate last night really, made them feel. And then you might think, okay, I might want a chocolate. So all of this information feeds into you and that it could impact how and what you would choose to eat for the rest of the day. And all the way until you go to sleep. And then you repeat so on and so forth. But one of the things is that we don't really think about all of these factors and information and how it could impact what we choose to eat. So going on, we'll be talking about the mental shortcuts in the food choices, right? When familiarity wins over nutrition. Because as mentioned, our brain, we take in a lot of information throughout the day. And our brain likes to use automatic shortcuts called heuristics to make decisions with very little conscious thought because it's meant to make life easy for you. And these shortcuts could actually help us to judge the food choices very quickly. And it's guided by past experiences, the visual cues that we see, and the emotional associations that we have, such as ice cream brings smiles to everyone. There's a study that did that. It's a very interesting phenomenon. And therefore, there's like, if I would, when I eat ice cream, I'll feel happy, or when I'm happy, I might think of ice cream or certain type of related foods from that. However, one thing that we fail to notice is that even though it's quick, it's speedy, but it also results in some sort of a bias. And what this commonly happens is that we might assume something might be healthy because it's seen in the green packaging, which is normally associated with health, or when we see something that says natural or with fruits, etc., it feels very familiar to us. And it's like, these are all the traits of a healthy product and a good product, even though it could be high packed in sugar or things that are not really that good for you. So let's talk about how this is. And this is called nudges, because nudges are subtle suggestions, right, that influence your tendency to make choices. And it's very unconscious. And this is in psychology and in behavioral science, it's impacting your choice architecture. And it's everywhere in wherever that we go, be it the supermarkets, be it the restaurants that you go, be it the cafes, the marketing strategies by certain brands, all of these, they feed information to your brain and often it overrides the logical part of things, right? So such as if you, a study found that if you place healthier options at eye level or at checkout counters, such as fruit or such as the products that people want in the supermarkets or places want you to purchase more, if you place it very easy at the end and it's easy for them to just take and go, they see an increased sales in those numbers and in the choices. But of course, the nudges can come in the form of language and visuals. So like I mentioned just now, improved with fruits or low-fat claims on the products. Unless you read the food label, you probably missed out and you just think that I'm taking the healthier choice because I took one with more fruits. And by putting all the visual tones, such as earthly tones, fitness, imagery, or sustainability logos, it all feeds into the emotions that you're making the right choice from there. And it often makes you feel that I'm doing something right, even if it's not the best for you. So let's talk about behavior change. Now that we know what are some of the factors that could impact your choices, why is it so hard for us to change behaviors? Because whenever you're doing something or you're making a choice, there are three things that are happening at the moment, at the very moment. The first one is automatic habits and your impulses kicks in. So if you do want to eat a bar of chocolate, you have the impulse for chocolate. And it's that motivation for you to go and buy it. And then the habits comes in, etc. And that's where it kicks in. However, when you get to that stage of, should I actually be eating that bar of chocolate? You are considering everything against the goals, which is I want to be healthy, I want to reduce this, I want to change that, or I want to, just limit, etc., etc. And therefore, we are in an internal struggle where we're trying to consciously select the right choice to hit the goals, and therefore it feels like you need to sacrifice this thing, that impulse that you have, in order to do the right thing and select the healthy options. And so when your cravings and convenience competes for your actual attention, the right choice that you're making and the one that makes you healthier, it actually feels like it comes at a cost to you and it's not rewarding you for your action of selecting the healthier one. And what's the outcome? You will feel deprived, you will feel frustrated, and you feel less motivated to carry on because I can't eat the things that I want. And when that happens, behavior change becomes so hard to sustain because it's a constant battle against yourself and it's very taxing and tiring. So I think what I gave you is just quite a quick snapshot of how everything intersects: the psychology, the nutrition, and the human behavior element of your choices, right? And before we move on to the psychology behind successful behavior change, and Alex will come in and talk about how the tools and the initiatives that we do at TTN can help you, I think it's now the right time to talk about some of the questions that we have in the Q&A bit, because that's where, since the information is fresh, let's talk about it from there first. Right, over to you, Alex.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you, both of you. That was, really, really interesting. Yeah, we had some great questions come in. Please do feel free to keep adding them to the chat. We've got a few more minutes of the session left. I'll start with a nice topical one that's come from Anne. I'll let you both decide which one of you wants to answer this. But the question is, I have no appetite in this heat, but I'm drinking a lot more than usual. Is skipping meals a problem?
I can answer that one. I think it obviously great that you are drinking in terms of hydration, but also our demands for kind of hydration does go up, and we know that a lot of that does come from our food as well. So we've got to be aware that are you drinking enough to kind of offset that supply? But we've also got to then consider that hydration is one part of this picture, and actually, energy, all these other things also come from the food that we eat. So, it may be that you move into a model where you're eating a little bit less, but can you have things like maybe more like smoothies or things that you can add in that also supplies you with hydration? So I think you know, it's hard to, you can't just, if you skip meals, what else are you losing? One, hydration, two, your energy supply. So yeah, that's what I would say. But we do know that appetite does curb hunger. Hot weather does curb hunger.
Okay, thank you. Another one, interesting actually, a bit more of a psychological one. This has come in and says, a lot of people talk about eating out of habit rather than hunger. How would you help someone quickly tell the difference in real time?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, right, a lot of these things when we're talking about eating out habit is things that happens unconsciously. So, how would you do it in real time? There is this 60-second hack that you can do, which is to ask yourself, why am I wanting this, or why am I choosing this? Because the main one is when you actually come up with the rationalization of how you made that choice or that want, it actually brings you back and into a more aware state. So you're being conscious and aware of what and why you're eating and doing. So normally the three questions is what am I? Why am I choosing this? Does it fit with the goals that I'm trying to look for? And more importantly, what is the specific emotion or the joy or the feeling that I have when I consume this product? And can this actually be replicated through an alternative? So, for example, if I want to drink a can of soda or fizzy drink, personally for me, it's because I like the refreshing feeling of the soda and the fizz. But could that be replicated with soda water? Some people I say, soda water is not that great. So can we actually mix it with a healthier alternative, such as soda water with orange juice to neutralize some of that harsh taste that some people complain about soda water? So it's all these things where we're taking one simple step at a time. And then from there, you can tell the difference between I'm just eating because I want to, and I'm actively choosing something. And it provides that outcome that I'm looking for. Right.
I think I'm just going
Brilliant.
to add to that as well and flip the question a little bit on its head in the fact that because we have the access, we have constant access to food, to drink, we have somewhat lost our ability to feel hungry as well. And I would say that, hunger inherently isn't a bad, I'm not going to take this to extreme, but isn't a bad thing to feel. And if you feel like your hunger cues are somewhat askew, then I would try and look at maybe just trying for a week of trying to eat at similar times each day and trying to reset that kind of hunger response. So I talked a little bit about that kind of chrononutrition picture. But I would just try and stick to kind of, it doesn't have to be 3 meals a day, it can be more, but like clear intervals and keep to that schedule for a week and then see how you feel.
Brilliant. Thank you both. A bit more of a practical one here, which is very interesting. So someone has said, my firm provides baskets of treats for us, but I'm not sure how healthy they are. Things like flapjacks and protein bars. What should we be asking for?
I mean, firstly, it's lovely that they do provide things. I think in terms of, there is a piece on being able to read a label, which obviously I can't just pinpoint that all, but I would ask for more kind of whole foods. So whether that's kind of fruits, nuts, seeds, popcorn, some of those varieties are good. So the actual kind of components of whether I'd look into what the flapjack is made up of, what the protein bar is made up of. These industries are a huge money making industry, and if they're kind of got protein lathered on the kind of branding, what is that protein made up of? Where is it? A lot of these brands, if you look at the ingredients, they are able to boost up kind of protein through something called soy lecithin, which is kind of an additive, which obviously you don't want. We want to try and go to kind of whole varieties of foods as much as possible.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's another one that's a sort of snack related here. So I'll go with that next. Someone's asked, what kind of gap between meals and snacks should I be aiming for?
Um, I think the evidence is probably still going to change on this because, like I said, our food environment is changing and we have gone to more of a snack-based culture. uh, as it stands, if you're having a good balanced breakfast, and by balanced, I mean kind of that combining kind of a whole grain source with protein, with um, fiber, with fats, that should look to sustain you kind of 4 to 5 hours. And then you go and have maybe your lunch. Maybe you have a glass of water before. But there is that kind of scale of feeling a little bit hungry before you next eat is generally quite a good cue as well. But I can't, if you are feeling hungry more frequently, I would look at what are the components of the diet that you're having. Are you balancing that food as a matrix?
Okay, fantastic. And then there's one final question here. Again, please feel free to keep these coming in as we start to close out, but I'll just ask this one for now. Someone has said, when we work late, we can order delivery. It feels like a reward for late hours, but I'm sure it's not the best thing. How can I shift from treating this as a reward that I've earned, even if that's the right way to be thinking about it?
Okay, so I'll be taking this one. I think we can accept that something is a reward, but whether is it healthy or not is a separate thing. So we should also still view it as a reward because you're doing something, your treat is a treat for yourself. That's the right way to do it. If not, why would you order it, right? But I think it's on the other side where after you order it, you know, is it something where you feel the need to consume everything in one go? Or could you have a healthier alternative to pair with it so that, for example, if you decide to have a pizza or you have like a kebab or whatever, that's fine. But it's like, Mel, you could help me with this later. But in terms of a behavioral science perspective, what we are asking is that you start evaluating what you're eating and why, and could healthier alternatives be there, be it in terms of, wouldn't say portion control, but just limiting to how much you eat, right? So if I want to eat a bar of chocolate, or like there's a bar of chocolate in front of me, is a reward for me. So bar chocolate being the delivery, right? Do I need to finish the entire bar? Or can I just have a piece of that chocolate just for now? But at least I know I ate, three-quarters of a bar less than what I did the last time. And so we're taking that small steps to start, getting where is the point where we feel happy, and then we start making healthier alternatives to fill up the rest of it. Could it be more in terms of the delivery takeout? Could it be more veg and salad, or is it we eat half of this and then we have another healthier snack in between to complement it, so on and so forth. So in terms of the behavior change perspective, we are asking you to do it one step at a time. And instead of going from totally unhealthy to totally healthy, because it's very hard to sustain from there. And that's where we're talking about you feel frustrated, you feel angry, and you feel, it's so hard. I don't want to change my behavior. I'll just stick back to the unhealthy things because it's a rewarding thing for me. But Mel, I'm pretty sure you have things to, add on to that with regards to how we can keep the nutrition bit while also indulging a bit on the guilty pleasures.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to look at kind of having an 80-20 diet where, and for some people that may be 70-30 to start with, 60-40, but where you eat kind of well 80% of the time. But for that 20%, we've got to honor the fact that we eat food because it brings us joy, it's social connection, because it's delicious. And it's like, where do you want to spend that 20%? Do you want to spend that on a delivery in the office? Are you enjoying that delivery in the office? Or would you rather, maybe have that with, your family or friends at the weekend? And it's just asking yourself maybe that question. What I would say is kind of whatever you choose, you don't want to then feel guilty about it because then that's serving no one. So, go and enjoy it. But I think if you're now considering that, there are plenty of options on Deliveroo now that, have health optimized type of food. So I think like things like Farmer J, poke bowls, even Nando's and things like that, when you can build like chicken and protein and veg around it. So there are loads of options, but I think it's asking yourself that question, are you going to use it, today to maybe fuel you for tomorrow, or are you going to use it because actually, you're going to really, really enjoy it? And going back to that Brian's point earlier, just pausing and thinking that through, how am I going to feel afterwards? Where is it? What direction am I getting pulled in right now? So that those are the types of things that I would think about.
Amazing, thank you. And one final one, very relevant to us, so I'll put this to both of you. How important is nutrition in the workplace, and what can businesses do, apart from working with us, of course, to support their employees to eat more nutritiously?
I think it depends where your kind of workplace is already at, but having that conversation initially, I think we are going to see nutrition come on the agenda more and more, particularly with the links with brain health. I think brain health is getting a bit of a glow up at the moment, and quite rightly. So I think starting off with that kind of having that conversation, even challenging with like previous question with the snacks that are available. Making them aware of the benefits to brain health. I'm sure Alex, you'll also pick up on that in a bit.
Please do, yeah. And if we got this very convenient segue to the next slide, actually, where I'll just talk a little bit about us and some of the solutions that we offer. But first of all, I do thank you to Brian and Mel. That was excellent. And again, thank you for everyone that's attended for braving the heat wave and joining us. So yeah, as I mentioned at the top of this session, we're Think Through Nutrition. We specialize in, this link between brain health, nutrition, and productivity in so many different ways. You can see on this slide, these are some of the broad ways that we work, whether it be talks and workshops, well-being programs, Lana, our digital platform, which we haven't touched on much today, but is another solution we offer. And I'm also working closely with HR and catering teams in-house, just broadly advising on what tweaks can be made. But specifically in terms of what we're talking about today, if we go on to the next slide, you'll see We believe that we've outlined the sort of the benefits and the basics of what we do here fundamentally in this session. And we have a 3-week program, fuel, rhythm, behavior. Mel talked about these 3 things earlier. They're the sort of the tenets of what we work and what we work from and what we do. All of this is what helps us achieve our goals with our clients. And what we've put together is a program that is an extension of this. Essentially, it's 3 sessions covering those 3 topics, as you can see on the screen now. We advise that they're weekly online sessions. We also do in-person sessions. Um, we provide sessions like this, but also behavior tracking. We provide materials, templates, practical tools, and sort of group question and answer sessions, troubleshooting, and so on. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see there's a QR code. Please do scan that. That will link through to our website, to the page where you can book in a call with us to discuss this. There's also my email address there and our website. And really, yeah, what we want to do is just sort of show how you can take what we've discussed today, and make it practical, apply it to your teams, and ultimately be more effective and efficient. We like to start small. We suggest generally a cohort of 20 to 30 people, so you can sort of test and learn, see the impacts, and then decide if you want to scale it. So if you're looking to do that, we'd love to have a chat with you. Our programs have been implemented in so many different sectors and settings. We'd really love the chance to speak to you about that too. And yeah, please do feel free to get in touch any of the ways on the screen now, and we'll be in touch next week with some materials from this session today as well. So yeah, thank you once again for everyone attending, and to Brian and Mel, that was fantastic. And yeah, wishing you all an excellent day.